Good morning, everybody. This is Imelda.
And this is Ken. And we start off this week with the Society News for Friday, the 21st of July. Dear readers, I am very sorry for any confusion caused last week as we began with the wrong Society News. The reader quickly updated the dates to match this week as he was reading. The county press items were correct and In Touch was correct, but had the wrong preamble, so some of you may not have listened to it. We will try hard to avoid this error in the future. Regards to you all, Terry Mitchell. Tuesday, there will be 2 coffee mornings held in aid of the Society on Tuesday, the 25th of July. The first at West Wight, the end of the line cafe, from 10:30 to 12 noon, and Bembridge, the Cloisters, 10:15 to 12 noon. Please go along and support these if you are able. The Dolphins will be swimming this coming Tuesday evening, Tuesday the 25th of July, at the Waterside Pool in Ryde. The swimming group has sole use of the pool during the session, and there are lifeguards in attendance. If you are interested in joining the group, please contact the Society to advise us of your swimming ability and for us to advise the Waterside Pool. Wednesday, the weekly coffee morning will be held as usual to support the Society this Wednesday, the 26th of July. The coffee mornings are not just for blind and partially sighted people. Anybody can come along and have a cup of coffee or tea, as well as a piece of cake. Tim Morris, the Centre Administrator, will be leaving the Society at the end of the week, 28th of July. If you would like to sign a card, then please let Chris Kane know. There will also be the chance to say goodbye to Tim at an informal get-together at Millbrook House on Wednesday the 26th July at 4 p.m. Please let Chris Kane, Senior Administrator, know if you would like to come along by Tuesday the 25th of July. On Thursday the 27th of July, the Knitters and Natterers will be meeting at Millbrook House. The group meets at 10:30 a.m. until 2 p.m. As well as the knitting, there is plenty of nattering, as well as volunteers that come and read to the group during the afternoon. Friday, the Striders will be going out for their monthly stride on Friday the 28th of July. The stride will be going from Key Lane, Brading, to the Dover. For those meeting at the start point, you'll need to meet at Brading Public Car Park at 10:30 a.m. Lunch will be at the Vine, St Helens. Any other news? There will be no clubs running at the Society during August. The clubs and activities will resume in September. As some of you are aware, the Society is conducting a client consultation survey. To give you an advance warning of the questions included in the survey, it follows the recording of In Touch for as long as the survey continues. If you would like to complete a survey independently, please contact the Society on 52205 and ask for a copy. Alternatively, you can find the survey on our website at www.iwsb.org.
And now the scaffolding news. Please find below a list of known footway obstructions for works, including scaffolding or hoarding. We are unable to include end dates, as many are extended on a week-by-week basis. Also included are tables and chairs permits that have been issued in the past week. In the Bay Area, Lloyds Bank, Regent Street, Shanklin. Muzzers, 26 High Street, Sandown. AJ's Takeaway, 45 Atherley Road, Shanklin. 32 Melville Street, Sandown, due up on the 27th of July. 23 York Road, Sandown, due up on the 8th of August. And in the Cowes area, 272 to 283 Arctic Road. 93 High Street, Cowes. Carvel Court Terminus Road, Cowes. The Royal British Legion, 85 High Street, Cowes. Jam & Sons, Thetis Road, Cowes. Regent House, Market Hill, Cowes. 5 Mill Hill Road, Cowes is due up on the 7th of August. And current hoardings, Development Site, Castle Street, East Cowes. And the new scissor lift at Waitrose, Well Street, East Cowes, is due up on the 14th of August, and the footway is to be closed, the bus stop to be out of action and may be relocated. In Newport area, Nippett's Course, West Street, Newport. Stead and Simpson, 121 High Street. 127 Honey Hill. W. Hurst and Son, Crocker Street. Home Bargains, Taylor Road, Gunville Road in Carisbrooke. 35 Carisbrooke Road. Red in Newport. Red Cross Shop, 9 to 10 Town Lane, Newport, due up on the 24th of July. And in the Ryde area, Ryde Street Gallery, 129A High Street. St Mary's Church Ryde along St Mary's Passage. Oasis Dental Care, 9 Melville Street Ryde. 77 George Street Ryde, due up on the 24th of July. Saltmead Cottage, Blewett Avenue, Seaview. Kimberley, Madeira Road, Seaview, due up on the 24th of July. 24 Nelson Road Ryde, due up on the 31st of July. West Wight area, the King's Head, Key Street, Yarmouth. Cornerways, the Broadway, Totland, due up on the 28th of July. And the South Wight area, 20 High Street, Ventnor. The RSPCA, 33 High Street, Ventnor. And 15 High Street, Ventnor, due up on the 25th of July. This week's In Touch. In Touch in this week's episode, Rory Cobb is the chair of VIEW, the Association of Education Professionals working with children who have visual impairment, and is due to retire from the position of RNIB's Officer for Inclusive Education later this year. Annie Bearfield is an advisory peripatetic teacher and head of service with a local authority in the West Midlands, and has produced a major report on social inclusion. Frank McFarlane was a teacher at St Vincent's School for the Blind in Liverpool for 36 years and still has an interest in education post-retirement. These three experts discuss how the definition of inclusion has changed over the years, what education can do to help those close the employment gap for visually impaired people, and the role of specialist teachers. And finally, for those of you who did not listen to last week's In Touch, it is repeated after this week's In Touch. 2 listeners to In Touch talk about some of the obstacles they faced when looking to move. Danielle Burgess is looking for a new home to rent and is discovering how separate she feels from the process because everyone else needs to be described to her. Because everything needs to be described to her. Ben Rindle, his visually impaired partner and their family, recently brought a flat off plan and had to find a way of envisaging it for himself. Penny Melville Brown has baked all her life and didn't stop when she lost her sight 17 years ago. She has recently won an international prize, which will see her baking all over the world to show how blind people can bake.
The headline for this week, Dreambuster is the headline. Hollywood actor Aykroyd accused of bullying tiny Isle of Wight firm over bottle design. Who you gonna call? The lawyers? Ghostbusters actor Dan Aykroyd has demanded an island couple stop selling their homemade hot sauce in a skull-shaped bottle, claiming the design is too similar to his premium Crystal Head vodka. Bloody hell hot sauce makers Bobby and Rosie Powers were shocked to receive a letter from the star's solicitors, accusing them of trademark infringement and insisting they destroy all their stock. It was Bobby who first approached the company to suggest a skull-themed Bloody Mary collaboration, and either he admitted had backfired. I can't believe this big company is trying to shut down a small family business on the Isle of Wight, said Bobby. They don't just want us to stop selling our sauce, they want us to destroy absolutely everything. When I read the letter, I was physically sick. It's so unfair. So many products are sold in skull bottles, and ours has nothing to do with their market. To make matters worse, Bobby has just bought 10,000 skull-shaped bottles, enough to last for more than 2 years. Californian Bobby, 51, and Rosie, 33, of the Strand Ride, founded Bloody Hell Hot Sauce as a hobby 3 years ago. A success story in the making. The £12 sauce is now sold at food shops across the UK, including Harvey Nichols and Fenwick, as well as on the island. And while Bobby makes the sauce with chili peppers and mango in his mother-in-law's kitchen, based on a recipe handed down by his Mexican grandmother, Granny Gonzalez, Crystal Head vodka is a much grander affair. Filtered 7 times, 3 times through layers of her Herkimer diamonds, and sold in 3-litre bottles for £350. We haven't made much money because we've been investing everything in the business. Enough for a salary, and that's about it. We've sold perhaps 6,000 bottles, and it's really starting to take off, said Bobby. In contrast, CNN reported Globefield Inc., the Canadian company which makes Crystal Head vodka, and was so confounded by Dan Aykroyd, had chalked up sales of more than $55 million within just 4 years.
Yacht crew get that sinking feeling. We've moved to the inside of the paper now. 3 people were rescued from a yacht that ran aground on Sandown Beach. The 36-feet motor yacht Barracuda became stuck at around 5 a.m. yesterday, that is Thursday. Crews from the Bembridge and Ventnor Coast Guard rescue teams helped the 3 people on board ashore after they called the UK Coast Guard for help in the early hours. The incident is being investigated by the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency and the Isle of Wight Council from a shoreline managed perspective. People were advised to stay away from a section of the beach where the craft was removed. The Coast Guard said the yacht was damaged when it ran aground and then began taking on water.
Anger over gridlock chaos in town. 5-hour delays on Red Funnel's car ferry service left East Cowes gridlocked and passengers furious. The Red Eagle car ferry was withdrawn from service on Monday due to a fault with its carbon dioxide suppressant system, causing huge traffic queues as sailings were delayed by up to 5 hours. Sailings on the East Cowes to Southampton route were cancelled in the following days while the fault was fixed. Normal service is due to resume today, Friday. A Red Funnel spokeswoman said earlier this week the fault is with a valve on the suppressor system. Everything possible is being done to minimise the disruption, and Red Funnel apologises to customers for the inconvenience. New parts will be delivered, fitted and tested, and a normal service is expected to resume on Thursday evening. Foot passengers were advised to travel on the Red Jet instead, where the spokeswoman said tickets would be honoured. When asked if customers would be compensated, Red Funnel said customers delayed by more than 90 minutes were entitled to rerouting on the Red Jet on the alternative sailing or a refund. Whitelink customers also faced delays and cancellations this week due to staff shortages on the Fishbourne to Portsmouth car ferry service and a mechanical problem on the ride to Portsmouth catamaran also.
And continuing with the same theme, ferry firm considered move from East Cowes. Red Funnel boss Kevin George told a public inquiry this week how the company had considered moving its operation from East Cowes. He revealed the ferry firm had considered moving the existing terminal from the town centre and using smaller ferries in a bid to boost its marshalling yard capacity, but both were ruled out. Mr. George was speaking at a public inquiry set up after the Isle of Wight Council planning chiefs last year rejected plans for a new marshalling yard and ferry terminals at Venture Quays, currently home to a number of marine businesses. The plan included the demolition of homes and businesses in Dover Road. The authority's planning committee has raised concerns about the loss of employment land. Mr. George told the hearing alternatives have been considered, including off-site marshalling facilities, use of smaller boats, and increasing their frequency and total relocation to be outside East Cowes. These have all proved to be unsustainable solutions. Opening Red Funnel's case, Neil Cameron told the inquiry, "The central issue in dispute between the principal parties is whether the use of the land north of Dover Road, Venture Quays, for ferry marshalling would be prejudicial to the local economy." However, the Isle of Wight Council's advocate John Parker argued, while the council recognises the benefit of improvement to the ferry service, it is firm in its view any such improvements should not come at the expense of the valued employment land. Further Planning Committee Chairman Richard Hollis said great concern had been expressed by businesses at the site. They could not plan for the future. He added aluminium welders who worked at the site were some of the finest in the world. He said, What you are replacing them with is a super car park.
Father Brian celebrates 70 years as a priest. A 93-year-old member of the Catholic Church, well known on the island as the skating priest for his prowess on the ice rink, has celebrated his 70th anniversary as a man of the cloth. The achievement of Father Brian Coogan of Grange Road, Sandown, ordained into the priesthood in 1947, was marked with a special Mass at St. Francis Catholic and Church of England Primary School, Ventnor. During the celebrations, attended by more than 300 people, Father Brown received an apostolic blessing from the Pope, and he is an avid Everton fan and was presented with a Toffees football shirt, which bears the name of Coogan and the number 70 on the back. They were told about his long and fascinating career as a priest in England and the Far East, 41 years of which have been spent on the island. In 2013, he took up the role of assistant priest for South Wight, which he continues today. He ran an ice skating club for children from East Cowes Primary and Archbishop King Middle Schools well into his 80s. Father Brian was who served St. David's Catholic Church, East Cowes, for 27 years, was first posted to North Borneo 70 years ago. As much of his missionary work involved teaching, he had to quickly learn a Chinese dialect. After almost 13 years in the Far East, Father Brian returned to England, teaching in a seminary in Southport, which he attended as a boy before he served as a parish priest in Basingstoke. He said he enjoyed meeting so many old friends after the celebration Mass, and rather than receive gifts, asked for donations to a charity close to his heart, Mary's Meals, which provides for the world's poorest communities. The charity received £930.
Fourth time unlucky for Lynn. A runaway car ploughed into a garden wall in Gurnard after its handbrake failed. And this is the fourth incident of its kind in the last 13 years. Lynn Cutts, the owner of Stone Lodge on Solent View Road, has lived there for 31 years and said it was the fourth time a vehicle had crashed through her picturesque garden. Failed handbrakes were to blame for the runaways in 2004, 2005 and 2012, and Monday's incident appears to be down to a faulty new handbrake, which was fitted on the car just a week before it rolled into her wall, the owner told her. The car belonged to a young couple who were visiting family in the area. Lynn, who was visiting her 90-year-old aunt at the time of the crash, said, "My neighbours called me about it after they heard a massive bang. They were very upset, as they know I'm always out there gardening, and if I had been there, I wouldn't have heard it coming, as there obviously wasn't any noise coming from the engine. Miraculously, no one was killed. So many people walk their dogs past here, so it's lucky no one was around at the time. Nobody was hurt, and it's only a wall, so it's not too bad. But I'd just planted the summer border and spent a lot on the plants. The wall could cost around $2,500 to replace. I'm in touch with the insurance company. Lynn said she wasn't keen on installing bollards, as they would spoil her pretty garden, but she is considering putting an ironic no parking sign next to the flowers.
Residents forced out by ferry noise. It was her dream house by the sea, but less than 2 years after moving into her waterside cottage in Medina Road, Mary Limpington, 36, is looking to move due to the unbearable noise and the house-shaking vibrations from the new floating bridge. Mary, who suffers from nocturnal epilepsy, claimed it had become so bad it was causing her seizures to start again. She said it started to happen when there were works through the night, and my GP says it's due to the lack of sleep. The shock of the brow landing shakes the windows. Mary was not only the only resident to claim they had been forced out since the new vessel came into service. Her neighbour, Annie O'Sullivan, 46, had moved back to London because of the noise. She said, "I bought the cottage so my mum could spend some time of her retirement there, but it's been so difficult. She's quite fragile. I wouldn't want to risk taking her there in case she couldn't sleep. Unless the noise reduces and I can put my mother in the cottage she wanted to retire in, it is very unlikely I'll be back on the island soon." This week their complaints were backed by an investigation carried out by the Isle of Wight Council Environmental Health, which found a noise inside the cottages with windows closed reached up to 42 decibels, above the World Health Organization guidelines. The report found impact noises from the floating bridge operations were significant within the residential properties, and that residents' complaints appeared to be justified. However, it added, the council is unable to take enforcement action against itself, so no formal determination of statutory nuisance can be made. Annie added, "I don't like to make a fuss and try to be very supportive of the island, but I just feel we've been ignored."
And more about the floating bridge. This one is headed Floating Bridge, No Answers. Floating bridge questions went unanswered and pleas for charges to be deferred at this week's Isle of Wight Council meeting. Following a demonstration outside County Hall, protesters gathered in the public gallery to quiz councillors about ongoing problems with the vessel, which has been repeatedly taken out of service since it was launched in May. They reiterated concerns the design was flawed and the service poor, criticised the contract to build the new bridge, and called for those responsible to be named and shamed. A committee member for Infrastructure and Transport, Councillor Ian Ward, said all questions would be answered following a full independent review due to be carried out by auditors PwC. He said, "A commitment has been given to address the issues regarding perceived problems with its design and delivery and how it was procured. We will publish the findings as soon as possible. After fixing snagging issues this week, contractor Mainstay Marine was due to officially hand over the floating bridge. But Councillor Ward said the council would not take ownership of the vessel until it was satisfied all the problems had been resolved. 2 motions due to be discussed by councillors to suspend foot passenger charges until the floating bridge was running as it should, and to scrap charges for parents taking their children to school were deferred. Council rules state any motion that would have a significantly budgetary impact must be deferred to the Cabinet.
Ventnor building collapses further. A building that partially collapsed last week could be in danger of crumbling even further. Firefighters and the Isle of Wight Council building control officers were called to Alexandra Gardens, Ventnor, at 12:45 yesterday, Thursday, following reports more masonry as well as the top bay windows had fallen from the building. 8 flats were evacuated last Tuesday when parts of the building started to collapse. 2 people were in the building at the time. Fire crews returned to the scene yesterday after more masonry fell from the building. John Lutus, building control manager, said, "We anticipated further pieces might fall out, which is why we put this safety cordon in place. The cordon has done exactly what it was intended to do. There is still a risk of further debris falls." The scaffolders are coming today to prevent any major collapse and to remove loose debris. It is anticipated it will be safe by the end of the next week so we can remove the cordon. The latest collapse comes less than 24 hours after the council pledged to carry out repairs and reopen the road. At Wednesday's full Isle of Wight Council meeting, Ventnor Town Mayor raised concerns about the impact of road closures around the partially collapsed building on tourism and local businesses. Island roads particularly closed the section of Pier Road running from the High Street to the junction of Alexandra Gardens. We need diversions and safety signs so Ventnor can carry on being as good as it is, Councillor Mack said. The cause of the collapse has not yet been revealed.
Woman jailed for attack on pensioner. A 71-year-old woman was punched to the ground in a totally unprovoked attack by a homeless woman, Island magistrates heard. The victim, a holidaymaker, was floored by a single blow to her mouth, delivered by Alice Wight, 31, in Victoria Road, Sandown, in the afternoon of May the 25th. The pensioner banged her head against the hard pavement and was so stunned by the attack she couldn't get up by herself, said Vivian Dussey, prosecuting. He said, "She's thoroughly shocked by what happened. She's a retired lady. It was totally unprovoked attack. She could have had a far worse injury." Wight, who appeared in court last Friday, was jailed for 8 weeks after admitting assault. For Wight, Barry Arnett said the case was a sad one for all concerned. He said, "My client pleaded guilty at the first opportunity. I can't give any insight as to why the offence was committed. What you do have is a lady with a number of issues. It is quite clear when you look at her record, she has been made the subject of community and hospital orders. That shows the extent of the difficulties she has got. It is clearly sad for the victim and sad for someone who is 31 and of no fixed abode with clearly identifiable issues. Magistrates told Wight only a custodial sentence was justified for the assault.
Teenager hurt on way to school as car mounts pavement. A terrified mum feared her daughter would die after being told she was involved in a hit-and-run accident on the way to school. Saffron Wilson, 13, was walking along Wellington Road on her way to Carisbrooke College when a blue people carrier mounted the pavement and hit her. Her friends phoned her mum, Wendy Wilson, and she rushed to the scene fearing the worst. Wendy, of Newport, said, "My first thought was she going to die, and I needed to be with her. When I saw her, I was relieved, as I had imagined blood and bones sticking out and all sorts." Saffron who managed to stay on her feet during the incident, was taken to hospital where her badly bruised arm was placed in a sling. As her mum's young carer, Saffron is struggling to meet Wendy's needs with her right arm out of action. Wendy said, "Although I was relieved Saf only had bruised arm, I was angry that the car had mounted the pavement, and even angrier a smaller child could have been hurt or killed." Police are appealing for witnesses to the incident, which happened on July the 13th at 8:50 a.m. Anybody with information can call 101, quoting the reference number 441 702 68622.
Homes plan for Riverlea site. Plans to pull down Sandown's historic Art Deco cinema, the Riverlea, to make way for 6 new homes have been submitted to island planners. The building, more than 130 years old, was used as a costume warehouse until 2014, when the owner moved to new premises. A campaign to try to save the Rivoli, famous for its fan-shaped Art Deco facade, was launched by island filmmaker Bruce Webb in 2013. However, it came up short of the £160,000 cash target required to buy it. The plans are for a pair of semi-detached 3-bedroomed houses and a terrace of 4 with 2 bedrooms. They supersede a plan in 2015 for 5 homes. So far, only Sandown Town Council has commented on the Isle of Wight Council's planning website, supporting the application. No fresh campaigns to save the iconic landmark have been launched. The closing date for comments is Friday, the 28th of July.
Ventnor toilets proving costly. Thousands of pounds are being spent repairing and maintaining the Eastern Esplanade public toilets, Ventnor Town Council was told. Around £4,570 has been spent by the Town Council on the eco-friendly loos since it took over the lease from the Isle of Wight Council a year ago. At their meeting this week, they heard an additional £4,100 would need to be spent on the toilet block's green roof, which needed replanting and making watertight. There will also be a significant additional cost after a leak to the Isle of Wight shaped paddling pool supply pipe from the toilets. It was identified recently. Also a responsibility of the Town Council, which would push expenditure to around £10,000 on amenities in the space of 15 months. Ventnor Mayor Councillor Jason Mack was critical of the Isle of Wight Council, saying he was disappointed such works were required already on a building less than 10 years old. Town Clerk Dave Bartlett said it was a shame the toilets were costing such a lot to put right and improve, but stressed it was a necessary facility on Ventnor's seafront. Our budget for the town's 4 toilets is £40,000 this year, and have already advised the town council we will need to top it up from its reserves to cover unforeseen expenses, said Mr. Bartlett. The £285,000 toilets opened in 2009 to a fanfare as the island's first water turbine-powered superloo. The toilets have been beset with problems ever since they opened 8 years ago, with the main money-saving feature, the water turbine, out of action for several years.
Ice cream makers in tasty move. 2 major island ice cream companies may have the local market licked. Minghella and the Isle of Wight Ice Cream Company have gone into partnership and pooled their expenses. Minghella will retain its brand name under the Isle of Wight Ice Cream Company's umbrella and will use the Enterprises facility at Riverway, Newport. By sharing one base, overheads are reduced, with the biggest green benefit being the delivery logistics. Now in its 4th year of trading, the Isle of Wight Ice Cream Company boasts 30 flavours named after island villages. The Minghella family have made gourmet ice cream on the island since Edward founding it in 1950 and has a portfolio of 230 flavours. Georgia Minghella and her husband Richard have been working with Jenny Simmons and her team at the Isle of Wight Ice Cream Company to ensure their ice cream was made to the authentic Italian recipes and replicated in the company's production unit. Both brands will use milk from Reed's Farm in Carisbrooke and Medina Food Service, based beside them at Riverway, and they will take care of deliveries to significantly reduce food mileage. Minghella has won more than 80 Great Taste Awards and other top accolades.
Shoplifter set his dog on manager giving chase. A thug who stole 3 bottles of cider from a shop riled up his dog and encouraged it to attack the manager, who ran after him. The man tied his dog up and went into Pan Stores on Royal Exchange at 6:45 a.m. last Friday and helped himself to £5 worth of alcohol. The manager of 23 years, Steve Smythe, ran after the thief, and a colleague accompanied him and filmed the chase. Steve, 49, of Newport, said the thief began slapping his dog and psyching it up, shouting, "Go on, attack him," and pointing to Steve. The dog's previous owner saw the video on social media and later took the dog away from the man. "I've been a manager for 23 years and I think this is the worst one I've ever had," Steve said. "It was my day off, but I popped in and it happened, so I went for him. I wasn't worried about the dog actually attacking me until he let it off the lead. Then I thought it was time to leave. we were really concerned about the dog and how he was treating it.
And with that, Ken and I will be saying goodbye and best wishes to you all. So goodbye from Imelda.
Bye-bye, everybody. Bye.
Good morning, I'm Stephen.
And I'm Jan.
And we'll be reading the letters and features pages of the County Press this week, starting with the letter of the week headlined Terrapins Are Not Terrors, from Tanya Tigwell in Ventnor. It was with great sadness that I read in the County Press of the 14th of the 7th about the terrapins being removed from Bonchurch Pond. For many years they have lived an idyllic life, totally wild, with no interference from humans, even hibernating in the winter, causing no problems and not being troublesome. Who is Brian Lucas to decide that after all these years they're not supposed to be in there? As for the terrapins eating young fish, there are thousands of fish in the pond, and 9 terrapins would have no impact on the fish population. Perhaps Mr. Lucas wants to remove the herons, which visit the pond and also eat fish. Mr. Lucas has done a very mean thing. I will miss the terrapins greatly.
And giving Gernard a giggle. This is a letter from Joan Hall of Gernard. A very big thank you to all ladies and gentlemen for your muscle who contributed to the yarn bombing event in our village last weekend. The woolen decorations around our streets were fantastic. I have lived in Gernard since 1959. I have never seen such joy and laughter. People are smiling and laughing, talking to each other, so many photos taken, and strangers wandering through. Villagers who have lived here forever are marvelling at the craftsmanship of fun items, such as Hickory Dickory Dock on the village clock, starfish, octopus, shells and fish. Also the doves on the cross at the church. So many treasures to seek out, some catching you by surprise. The craftsmanship is awesome. Well done, everyone. Such a small suggestion has grown into the best weekend I can ever remember. You have brought the village alive and friendships restored. All donations go to the Elephant Club and Ability Dogs for Young People.
And now a letter from Belinda Wright of Cowes headlined Pride Made Me Proud. Congratulations to everyone involved in the first Isle of Wight Pride. It was thrilling to see so many people lining the streets to watch the colourful march, and the beach area was very well organised. Gorgeous to be sitting on the sand, watching great acts such as Horse and La Voix, really getting the party going, and gratifying to hear her comment on the island flying so many rainbow flags. Such a mix of age and family groups.
And from P. Peters of Freshwater. Please may I thank some amazing, kind, generous people. Thank you to the lovely couple who found my husband's phone and wallet scattered along a road in Freshwater Bay and kindly picked everything up and delivered it all to our house. Thank you also to the lovely man who a week later found my son's wallet on the beach at Yarmouth and delivered it to our house too. I am now going to use elastic to sew their wallets to their belts. We are so fortunate and blessed to live in a beautiful, safe place with such truly wonderful, considerate, thoughtful people who go out of their way to help others.
And now news of some grants that are on offer to Isle of Wight good causes from NewsQuest Media Group, new owners of the County Press. The County Press has just become one of the NewsQuest family of newspapers, and one benefit for islanders is a chance for good causes to bag some cash for worthwhile projects. Through the Gannett Foundation, which is the charitable arm of Gannett Company Incorporated, owner of NewsQuest Media Group, which publishes regional and local newspapers, websites and magazines all across the UK. The Gannett Foundation provides funding to support local projects and organisations in areas where NewsQuest operates. The funds are managed by the Quartet Community Foundation. In the past 10 years alone, the Gannett Foundation has made grants in the UK alone, totalling almost £4 million. Most of the applications are for relatively modest sums meeting everyday needs, but worthwhile projects on a bigger scale will be considered. It is also able to join with other contributors to support elements of more ambitious projects. Preference will be given to ideas which create a durable legacy for the community. The founder will consider single events or projects of limited duration that otherwise meet our criteria. And the following restrictions apply. Applicants must be registered charities. Applicants must not have received a grant from us within the past 2 years. The Foundation will not fund salaries, professional fees, or day-to-day running or maintenance costs. General appeals as opposed to specific projects. Projects that do not bring benefits to our local communities. Political or religious objectives. State or privately run schools other than special needs, or hospitals other than hospices. It will favour projects that demonstrate good planning, oversight, and financial responsibility. You must supply copies of your most recent accounts where required by the Charities Commission or other appropriate financial information, together with any supporting materials and details of your organisation's managing committee. The grants will be monitored by the editor of the County Press, and it will be a condition of each grant that the recipient must report back on it to the chairman of the trustees within 12 months of the award. Forms can be collected from the Isle of Wight County Press offices in Brannan House, 123 Pyle Street, Newport, postcode PO30 1ST. The closing date for entries is October the 9th, 2017. The Foundation will not accept applications that are not made using this form.
And we're now moving on to the Looking Back column, taking you back first of all 100 years ago, July the 21st, 1917. And that year there were several letters home, presumably from the war, published this week. Driver George Harding wrote home from the Palestinian front to his mother in God's Hill. I am writing this under a fig tree, and I am sending you one of the leaves of the tree as a souvenir. The weather is still very hot here, and there are thousands of flies which won't let you rest for a moment during the day. Mr. and Mrs. J. Shilton of Fairley Road at Newport also received a postcard from their son, R. F. Shilton, saying he was doing well in a hospital in Nazareth as a prisoner of war, and mentions for the first time he has been wounded in the arm. While the war raged on, 4 young boys, ranging from 10 to 14 years old, were charged with theft. Their stolen goods? Pears, valued at 5 shillings. Market gardener Robert Saunders said he had seen 2 older boys up a pear tree in the garden, picking the fruit, and the other boys in the road catching and filling their pockets. 2 of the boys had a prior conviction for stealing rabbits, for which their mother had given them a good thrashing. Each was ordered to pay 2 and 6pence fine, and 1 shilling and 3pence damage, or face 5 years detention. 5 days detention.
And 75 years ago, on July the 18th, 1942, a Cowes man was awarded the George Medal. Among 23 survivors of the crew of the Shakespeare, which sank following a fight with an Italian submarine, was Percy Donald Jones of Park Road in Cowes. He was 3rd officer of the vessel, where 19 crew members were killed and others seriously injured. The Food Control Committee met this week, and a statement made at the meeting said there was a great deal of public dissatisfaction with the meat supplies on the island. The committee replied no complaints regarding the standard of the meat had been made to them.
50 years ago, July the 22nd, 1967. High jumping was banned at Bishop Lovett's School in Ryde, following a series of incidents, some of them serious. A number of sports staff said the accidents had included a broken leg and 2 broken arms. The high jump facilities were blamed and a ban put on the event until the authorities provided a proper high jump pit. And concern over the recent increase in bus fares was expressed at a meeting of the Rural District Council. Mr. Musson argued the increase would contribute to a decrease in people using the bus. He argued if members of the council found the company could affect certain economies in their running costs, they should let the council know so the suggestion could be taken to the company.
And 25 years ago, on July the 18th, 1992, there was bubble trouble at a Chine beauty spot after sudsy water appeared in the brook running through Shanklin Chine. Engineers followed the route back up the cliffs and discovered, years ago, several properties opposite the Crab Inn were incorrectly connected to a surface water sewer instead of a foul water outlet. The sudsy water was coming from domestic washing machines and was sealed off temporarily. Peace talks followed a seafront blockade, and councillors agreed to compromise over the question of parking at Shanklin Esplanade. Angry coach drivers had previously blocked the seafront as a protest from being banned from using the Spa car park during July and August. An agreement was reached that would allow coaches at the park between 6 p.m. and 9:30 a.m. in what was deemed to be a reasonable offer.
10 years ago, July the 20th, 2007, a multi-million-pound Solent fort went up for sale again. No Man's Land Fort was built in the 1860s to protect Portsmouth from attack. The fort was sold after the owner, Lexi Holdings, collapsed with debts of more than £100 million. The property had no set price, although estimates were upwards of £10 million. The fort had been converted and upgraded many times and had lately been used as a conference venue with 2 helipads, an indoor swimming pool, a glass-domed garden, 5 bars, an ice cream parlour and a restaurant. There were around 100 rooms on 4 levels, as well as a sauna, jacuzzi and gym. Also 10 years ago, there was a mixed response to the news. The Isle of Wight would receive 68 new prison inmates. In a move planned for March 2008, the island would provide 68 new spaces, using a conversion of existing buildings at HMP Albany. Island MP Andrew Turner said it was regrettable as there had been no consultation with the community. However, Isle of Wight Council leader Andy Sutton said it was a good opportunity to create good quality jobs for islanders.
And also 10 years ago, Animal Magic helped save the rainforest with St George's Primary School end-of-term production. Thanks to staff at Amazon World, a snake, a macaw, a capybara and an armadillo were all incorporated into the production of Amazon Jungle Garden, a play full of songs about how important the trees, plants and animals of the Amazon are to the future health of the planet. As part of their studies, pupils held fundraising events and raised £300, enough to protect 6 acres of rainforest.
And after looking back, we now turn to the Wight Memories column. And this week, the headline is Village Boasts 2 Churches in 1. There are few villages that can boast not 1 but 2 churches, yet Whitwell has that honour. Although it looks like just 1 church, the parish church of Whitwell is actually 2. The original chapel of St Radegund in the parish of Gatcombe is Norman, dating from the end of the 12th century. Built by the de Esters of Gatcombe, it would have been used by the workers and tenants of their manor in Whitwell. The second chapel, dedicated to St Mary the Virgin, was built in the late 13th century as a chapel of ease for the tenants of Lord Stenbury at St Lawrence. As the parish churches would have been Gatcombe and God's Hill respectively, these chapels were certainly built to ease the burdens placed on the workers by having to walk a long distance to the local church. Little can be seen of the 2 original Norman churches, with extensive works having been carried out during the 15th and 16th centuries. The few visible signs of the original buildings include a zigzag fragment of an arch, which was discovered and moved when the chancel arch was rebuilt in 1868. In the Lady Chapel are a piscina and a wall cupboard or aumbrey, which are likely to date from the 13th century. Combining the 2 chapels led to some big changes in the 16th century. This included an archway from the larger chapel of St Radegund through the thick wall, granting access into the smaller St Mary Chapel from the chancel. This is now the Lady Chapel. Needing support for the thick Norman walls, a column of Purbeck stone was bought, but unfortunately it was too small. An improvised stone slab cap or abacus was fitted to add height and guarantee the pillar would provide adequate support. It is easy to identify as it is the only octagonal pillar among rounded ones. Looking at the mass and position of the 2 chapels, you can only imagine the building difficulties the workmen of the time must have faced. The interior leans very much towards the pre-Reformation Catholic Church. At the entrance to the Lady Chapel is a beautiful statue of the Virgin Mary and baby Jesus. Cast in plaster, it is part of a memorial to a soldier killed in the First World War. On the south aisle is a picture of Saint Erasmus, a copy of a medieval wall painting discovered in 1868 under coats of lime wash.
And the original painting crumbled after being exposed to the air, but the copy shows St Erasmus or St Elmo being tortured to death, his entrails being drawn out on a windlass, a type of winch. He's the patron saint of those with stomach complaints, as well as sailors. Close to the south door is a small wooden block in a glass case. Carved on it are the clasped hands of Jesus, including pierce marks. The block was discovered during the Victorian restoration works on the Lady Chapel and is thought to be one of the roof bosses from an earlier medieval roof. The bell tower was built during the extensions of the 15th and 16th century in the west end of the original St Mary's Chapel. Again, reinforcements of the original arches evidence the builders' battle with structural challenges. The bell tower is used for baptisms, and the font can be seen, unusually attached to a pillar, most fonts being freestanding. Strangely, the huge ancient bell that was said to sit in the tower is actually on the floor in the northwest corner of the nave. The tower now houses 6 bells and a clock that were donated by William Spindler of St Lawrence. The church is full of other notable pieces. The altar table in the Lady Chapel and pulpit are both Jacobean. The beautifully carved roof rood screen was dedicated in 1920 as a memorial to those lost in the First World War. There are 18th century Dutch chandeliers in the Lady Chapel and chancel, and the elaborate ceiling in the chancel. There are several stained glass windows, the most notable being those in the north wall of the nave. They are in memory of 2 of the children of General Sir John Cheap, who was the uncle of Walt Disney. The pews have been removed, as with many churches, and replaced with more comfortable chairs. Although some may argue over aesthetics over comfort, I am sure they are a blessing to the congregation. Indeed, the traditional furnishings of the church, highly favoured by the Victorians, may not be in keeping with modern tastes, but give a flavour of the awe and majesty they strived for in refurbishment. I cannot leave St Radegund and St Mary's without a little note about the former saint. Unlike the familiar Virgin Mary, St Radegund is a little-known French saint. She was born in Germany in the 6th century, captured in a raid, and taken to France. She is best known as the founder of the Convent of the Holy Cross in Poitiers, France, and was the patron saint of the d'Estour family. It is an unusual name, and there are only 5 churches in England, including Whittle, that are named for her.
And Mrs. Toogood of Brading has sent in 2 old Isle of Wight train photographs, looking back to the hard winter of 1963. These photographs were taken by her husband Peter on Boxing Day 1962, when the engine travelled with its train towards Brading Station. She remembers when it reached the tunnel under the railway bridge at Roborough Corner. An avalanche of snow fell across the steam engine, stopping it in its tracks. Her husband went over the field behind their cottage to see if he could help, and then came back to the cottage for his camera and took the photographs. It had snowed very hard that night along the road, and Mrs. Toogood remembers the snow covering iron fencing and hedges to the fields, and was bitterly cold, but the high winds had calmed down by the morning. The incident happened at 7 a.m. and took an hour and a half to clear the snow, and the engine could not be moved forward. The men managed to clear the snow away and stoked up the boiler so it could steam backwards all the way back to Ryde, still carrying its few passengers.
And now we have the My View column, in which a panel of columnists take it in turn to give their take on life as it is played out on the Isle of Wight. And the first of these is from Malcolm Mime, who asks, "Is it now time to ban all religions?" There have been some pretty horrific attacks carried out in recent times by religious extremists, and after each one we see both the public and the media stating, "We all stand together, and we won't be beaten." But an article published in the County Press a couple of weeks ago gives me reason to believe these are just words, and not actually the truth. According to the article in question, the Mayor of Ryde, Councillor John Henry Adams, stated that a concert given by the band of the Royal Marines in Ryde was poorly attended because people were scared they might be attacked. If Councillor Adams is to be believed, and there can be surely no reason not to believe such an upstanding member of the community, then the religious extremists are winning, in Ryde at least. The question, therefore, is, how do we eradicate these religious extremists so that we can all go about our daily business without fear of being attacked? The answer could lie in a precedent from the 1980s. In May 1985, at Heysel Football Stadium in Belgium, a few Liverpool supporters attacked Juventus fans resulting in 39 deaths. As a result of this act of violence, the British Prime Minister of the time, Margaret Thatcher, instructed that all English football teams, not just Liverpool, withdraw from playing football in Europe, and consequently English clubs were banned indefinitely. Many people thought such action was over the top. After all, it was just a handful or so of violent Liverpool fans that caused the deaths, and nothing whatsoever to do with the millions of innocent fans of all the other football clubs throughout England. But the authorities decided to go for a blanket ban on all teams. If Theresa May means it when she says enough is enough with regard to recent acts of terrorism by Islamic extremists, then she could follow the example of Mrs Thatcher and ban the preaching of religion, but not just single out Islam, ban all of it. Some people may see a blanket ban on the preaching of religion as an over-the-top reaction, just as many football fans in the 1980s thought it was unfair to ban all teams from playing football because of the actions of just one set of supporters. But it isn't just one religion that has extremist elements, just as Liverpool wasn't the only football club in the 1980s which had a hooligan element. There is, of course, another very good reason to stop the preaching of religion. England these days is a multicultural country, and it seems terribly outdated we still have the vast majority of our schools preaching the word of the Christian faith. It is surely wrong to force-feed children the word of one particular religion over another. They should be allowed to find out for themselves what they want to believe, or not believe. I won't be holding my breath waiting for Mrs May to ban the preaching of religion, and therefore the terrorist acts of religious extremists will no doubt continue, while the band of the Royal Marines plays on to an ever-decreasing audience. What was it John Lennon sang? Oh yes, nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too.
And another item in the My View column this week, do people actually live like this, asks Rebecca Roncoroni. It's the perfect Sunday morning. The sun is shining, bacon sandwiches and coffee, newspapers, door open. Radio 2 with Steve Wright's love songs playing. No plans. I open one of the Sunday supplements. Interior designer has worked hard to create a relaxed, light-filled look at her fun-filled family home. Oh, yeah? Either I am devoid of design appreciation, or she has magically created a show house with no visible signs of family living whatsoever. Let's look at the kitchen, the heart of busy family life. There is no visible sign of food or food preparation anywhere. No vegetable basket, fruit basket, spice rack, toaster, kettle, bread bin, nutri bullet, chopping boards, knife rack or utensils. There is, however, a champagne bucket and a bookcase full of, no, not cookbooks, but Penguin classics. The woman posing as though caught in the middle of placing the perfectly coordinated, perfectly arranged flowers in the middle of the completely clear kitchen table, is of course dressed in pure white with silver sandals. I find myself wondering why, when there are clearly only 4 chairs at this table, there are 5 cereal bowls and only 3 plates, before remembering vaguely someone told me that odd numbers always look better when arranging stuff to look pretty. There are some little white pots of herbs on the kitchen windowsill. They look suspiciously level and similar. That's because they are all thyme. How pointless. The sitting room has white furniture. Of course it does. If, like this designer, you have 2 small children, The obvious colour for your soft furnishings is white. You are of a certain income bracket. I reckon this is to subtly infer you have, inverted commas, help. No sane parents of small children, heck, mine are in their late 20s and 30s, and I still wouldn't, who has to clean for themselves, would dream of buying a white couch. There is no TV, no speakers for music, no books, no games, no photos, no magazines or newspapers, no toys, no rugs, no carpet. The sofa is one of those incredibly stylish but stupidly uncomfortable ones with sharp white wooden arms, 45-degree back and shallow seats. The kind you see painted grey in corporate HQs. There is a side table, a white cube with an angle poised lamp on the top, and 3 house beautiful magazines underneath, perfectly aligned. Nothing else. An identical table on the other side of this couch just has 2 house plants. Really? Not a dirty coffee cup in sight anywhere. The children's bedrooms, 1 boy, 1 girl naturally, are a parent's fantasy of powder blue with carmat and scalectric for the boy, and powder pink of candy stripes with brass bed and fluffy pillows for the girl, complete with positive mem for her, all in the princess pink. No mess, no half-eaten bananas, empty Coke bottles, sticky glasses, empty pizza boxes, crusty socks and dirty pants. No posters of teams supported, of pop stars idolised. No books, comics, Lego, paintings, crayons, dressing up, clothes, football boots, plastic jewellery, hairbrushes, shelves of rubbish. It is a cruel depiction, not of real life, of real families with real pesky kids who really are far too busy to worry about whether their room is shopfront perfection, but of parents who see their homes and their children as an outward reflection of a fantasy life. I can't wait for the perfect Jane and Joe to become the typical sluttish hoarders that most teenagers metamorphise into. I hope they do, she says.
And now some items of what's on coming up. First of which is news of the Bembridge Harbour Family Fun Weekend. For traditional fun, games, entertainment, parades and more, Bembridge Harbour Family Fun Weekend is the place to be next weekend. Throughout the event, there are on-the-water and shoreside activities for the young and young at heart, from building paper boats to counting crabs. The festivities kick off on Friday, July the 28th with a paper boat building workshop at the Dover Marina from 4 p.m, ready for the Great Bembridge Paper Boat Race the following day. A family fun buffet supper will be provided at the Ralvins Cafe from 6:30 p.m, and drinks will be available from the Waterhorse Bar, a converted vintage horse box. Most of the activity takes place on Saturday, July the 29th.
And an anniversary concert will be held to mark half a century of singing in aid of island charities. New Church Male Voice Choir will be presenting a golden anniversary concert at the Newport's Medina Theatre. The ensemble, which made its debut at the New Church Summer Fair in 1967, will celebrate 50 years of performance on Wednesday, August the 16th at 7 p.m. Joining them on the bill will be the first Act 2011 theatre group. Soprano Harley McManus and violinist Nancy Borrett, accompanied on piano by Wendy Aber. Over the past 50 years, New Church Male Voice Choir has raised tens of thousands of pounds for local good causes.
And now news of an ex-Islander bringing his comedy show home. Flash and Jack's comedy duo are coming to the Isle of Wight. The pair are bringing their new show, We're Gonna Need a Bigger Joke, to the Amy White Theatre at East Cowes Town Hall on August the 4th at 7:30 p.m. Gordon Flash Kirby and Adam Jax Jackson have worked as a professional act for more than 15 years. Flash moved to the island as a child and attended Node Hill Middle School, followed by Carisbrooke High School. The pair met while working as haven mates at the same holiday park, and a few years later, Flash and Jax was formed. They have since worked alongside the cast of BBC Two's Eggheads and Bobby Davro. Their island performance will be supported by Taurus, an 80s tribute girl band, and presented by Ian Townsend. The show is for over 14s. Tickets can be bought from Cathy's Card Shop and Value for You, or by contacting 07894 85229.
Jazz at the Apollo, Newport Jazz Club presents the internationally known classical and jazz flautist Kate Kusner and leading British saxophonist Tony Woods, accompanied by the Phoenix Trio, and that is on Sunday, 23rd of July, between 3 and 5:30 p.m. The ticket price is £12, £5 for students, obtainable from 730-601 or 523-879, and on the door if available.
And now news of lots of fun at the first Isle of Wight Asian Day. The island's first ever Asian Day, to celebrate all that is good about Asia, will be held at New Close Cricket Ground, Newport, on Sunday, July the 30th. The free-to-enter event runs between 10 a.m. and 8 p.m. and features the best in Asian cuisine, first-rate dance entertainment, fabulous traditional costumes, a Miss Asia Isle of Wight beauty pageant, and much more. The bar is open and food will be available all day. For further information, call 07514 805 961 or email iowasianday@gmail.com.
And an event organised by the Isle of Wight Council's Short Breaks team will be putting on a fun and information day aimed at children and young people with additional needs and their families. The free event will take place next Friday, 28th of July, on the Medina Leisure Centre field between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. There will be a number of free activities and entertainment to enjoy, including balloon modelling, magic shows, a chance to meet a bat from the Isle of Wight Bat Hospital, a falconry show, and much more. Much more. There's no need to book in advance. If your child has additional needs, just turn up for a day guaranteed to be full of fun. These events are organised to give families of children with disabilities or additional needs the chance to find out more about what the Short Breaks team can offer. Short Breaks is a service funded by the Early Intervention Grant, which seeks to provide safe and enjoyable opportunities for children with additional needs. The service also offers a range of after-school clubs, evening and weekend activities, and overnight stays for young people, up until their 19th birthday. For more information, visit the Isle of Wight website.
Okay, and now news of 100 Reasons to Celebrate. The centenary of the charity Lions International, the combined Lions clubs on the island, will be putting on a huge day of entertainments at Sandown Airport this weekend. The Lions Fair will feature marching bands, Scottish, Morris and modern dancing, the Scruffs Dog Show, live music from the Rug Band, Rodney and the Merry Minstrels, the White Hot Pipes, jazz singer Aiden Simone, a falconry display, a raffle, stalls and much more. The event will be opened at 10 a.m. on both days with the island branch standards of the Royal British Legion and music by the Medina Marching Band. Both days of events will run through to 4:30 p.m.
And a spookily good family show. Lightning struck twice at Southampton's Mayflower this week when the Addams family arrived on stage amid spookily well-timed thunderstorms. Stars including EastEnders Samantha Womack, who played Morticia Addams, and Family Fortunes host Les Dennis, Uncle Fester, did not disappoint as the curtain went up and a medley of music, gothic costumes and hair-raising humour emerged. As a family show, it had everything you could ask for. My son sat beside me in hysterics every time Loitering Lurch appeared on stage, while my husband and I delighted in more adult humour, which went straight over his head. Expect mischief and mayhem from prankster Pugsley Adams, Grant McIntyre, and an engaging performance from head of the family, Gomez. Incredible vocals and flawless dance routines were clearly well received by the audience, and as the show drew to a close, many were up on their feet. The Addams family is at the Mayflower until next Saturday, July the 29th, so if you are looking for something to do with the family to mark the end of another school year, this spooky show would be the perfect solution.
And now we have a short selection of additional news items from the county press. The first of which is strangers buy a boy a new bike. A kind-hearted couple were so moved by the plight of a toddler whose bike was stolen, they bought him a new one. When Kerez Lehman and Steve White saw a Facebook post by single mum Shannon Rose asking if anyone had seen her son Stanley's bike, they were shocked anyone would steal from a 2-year-old. We thought it would be nice to get him a new bike. My son Blake is only 3, and I know how much he loves his bike. It was horrible to think it could have happened to him or anyone's little boy, said Kerez, who's 26. The Ride couple chose the same bike Blake has, one decorated with dinosaurs, and delivered it to a delighted Stanley. He was so happy. He loves that bike so much. He won't put it away, said Shannon, 29, of Stour Place in Sandown. He even sits on it watching the TV. Stanley's original bike was stolen on July the 9th during a family walk along the cycle path between Sandown and Newchurch. Shannon and her children, Stanley, 10-year-old Ronnie and newborn baby Reggie Lee, had wandered away from the path where Stanley had left his bike, only to find it had disappeared when they returned. I thought someone had moved it or handed it into a nearby shop, which is why I asked on Facebook if anyone knew anything, said Shannon. Stanley cried all the way home and asked where his bike was, and I didn't know what to do. We always go for a walk there. It's beautiful, and I still can't believe his bike was stolen. It's really cruel. I couldn't afford to buy Stanley a new bike, so I'm really grateful to Kerez and Steve. They've restored my faith in human nature.
And it has taken 7 years and £31,000, but a referendum will finally be held on the Gurnard Neighbourhood Development Plan. Following the thumbs up from Isle of Wight Council Cabinet last Thursday, the referendum is due to be held in the parish on September the 7th. If residents vote in favour of the plan, which aims to ensure any development enhances the character of the village and meets the needs of the community, it will be brought into force as soon as possible and form part of the Council's statutory planning policy. Neighbourhood development plans were introduced as part of the Localism Act to give local people a greater say in planning policy. The Gurnard Plan has been produced by the Parish Council with the involvement of the community. A consultation revealed residents wanted to preserve the green gap between Gurnard and Cowes and were concerned about large housing developments.
So that brings to an end this week's selection from the County Press. So it's a goodbye from me, Stephen.
And it's goodbye from Jan.
Goodbye.
This is the BBC.
This is In Touch, the magazine programme for people like me who are blind or partially sighted. I'm Peter Wight. Thanks for downloading this week's edition. Good evening. We're concentrating tonight on what is one of the most contentious issues in visual impairment, education. And so it should be. After all, it's about the methods of teaching most likely to fit blind and partially sighted children for a world which tends to assume people can see perfectly. We've assembled 3 people who we hope can generate more light than heat. They may not thank me for saying so, but between them, they've clocked up well over 100 years of experience in the field. So we're treating them as a brains trust. Rory Cobb is the chair of VIEW. That's the Association of Education Professionals working with children with visual impairment. He's shortly to retire as the RNIB's Principal Officer for Inclusive Education. He's been in the service for 35 years. Annie Bearfield is an advisory peripatetic teacher. She's been head of visual impairment teams in 2 local authorities. She produced a major report on social inclusion. And Frank McFarlane, he taught at St Vincent's School for the Blind in Liverpool for 36 years. He also attended 2 special schools as a pupil in the 1950s and 60s. You all began your training at about the time that the 1981 Education Act marked a major shift in attitude. It said that wherever possible, disabled children should be educated in the mainstream. Rory Cobb, can you recall the mood of that time for someone like you just starting out?
Yes, I started out working at a special school for visual impairment, which was New College, Worcester. And at the time, I think there was a fair amount of hesitation about whether it would work. I remember colleagues at New College, Worcester saying, you can integrate partially sighted children, you can't integrate blind children. There was suspicion, I think, and concern that it might not be doable in practice.
Annie Bearfield, the stated aim was inclusion, although we tended to call it integration then. Has the meaning changed as well as the word?
Yes, it was integration, which was very much about providing resources, making the environment accessible, modifying the resources. I think we've moved to a more holistic model of support where we look at the whole child, we look at the child socially and emotionally now. Inclusion now by visually impaired teachers is not just about accessing the curriculum, it's also about making that child enabling them to gain high self-esteem and to be at one with their visual impairment within a sighted community.
Let me bring in Frank McFarlane, because you too had just started out on your teaching career in a special school. What was your attitude to this development, which after all was potentially very different to the way that you'd been educated yourself?
I was very, very hesitant about it, very, very, very unsure. And I think there was a lot of resentment about it at the time. The school I was teaching at St Vincent's, actually, since the mid-60s, had been sending 1 or 2 academically strong, and that's important at that time, academically strong students to local grammar schools. And in those days, I think it was, if they were academically strong, they'd be all right, probably. And I think, to take up Annie's point, it wasn't thought to be so much concentration on the whole child. If they were socially acceptable, that didn't seem to come into it. They were just shoved in there and got on with it.
I want people to get a picture of the kind of mainstream environment that visually impaired children were and are experiencing when this experiment, as it was then, began. And I'm interested in how it's changed, and has provision changed with it? This is Kelsey, aged 14, describing his working day just a year or so ago.
I'm completely blind with 2 artificial eyes. I had my left eye removed when I was a baby and my right eye removed when I was 6 years old, so I haven't been able to see anything for 8 years. We are about to do a form time activity before lessons in the morning. So I'm currently reading what's on the sheet in front of me, which is Braille, and this is currently titled "Should We Stay or Should We Go? The European Dilemma." This sheet would have been submitted by my form tutor to a team of LSAs, Lone Sport Assistants, who work with me, and they would have prepared it into Braille and printed it off in Braille, and it's been given to my form tutor to put on my desk for this morning. We're about to go off to maths from my form. I'm going to go via the Lone Sport Department to meet an LSA or a Lone Sport Assistant who supports me in maths, and then we'll go up to maths from there. Sorry.
It's all right.
I started learning my way around school like 18 months before I actually started in year 7, so halfway through year 5. So I'd had a lot of familiarisation, but I don't think I really properly got to know it until I was here, sort of all day, every day. So I'm currently looking over some old work, because it's a revision lesson. I'm reading Braille, which is currently about frequency tables, and I'm going to work from the Braille, possibly with a Brailler, which is how I produce Braille in lessons, or possibly orally with Miss Montague, my LSA in this lesson, Lone Sport System. She's given me data in terms of like the frequency tables, but I haven't got diagrams like these. I don't have these. In things like maths and science, where there is a lot of graph drawing on the board, a lot of demonstrations, there is a Lone Sport Assistant with me who can explain what's going on if it's not clear, or they can draw it on a resource that is tactile to me so I can see what's going on the board.
So Annie Bearfield, that's Kelsey, obviously in a pretty busy class situation and busy corridors and so forth. I'm just wondering how that situation has changed from the what you might call the early experiments to now.
I think there are aspects that haven't changed. So QTVIs, Qualified Teachers of the Visually Impaired, and Specialist Teaching Assistants, we're all still modifying hard copy resources. So we'll be providing large print, we'll be providing tactile diagrams and Braille. But I think what that clip didn't reflect is the role of technology and how that has transformed some children's ability to access the curriculum in perhaps a more discreet way and more independently. For example, remote access to the board using an iPad. That's core technology now. It enables children to fit in more discreetly, particularly in the secondary sector where children are desperate to fit in, desperate to be like their peers.
But Rory Cobb, that depends, doesn't it, on the school being able to keep up, getting the equipment, knowing what the best equipment to get is.
It does, and I think this is one of the issues nowadays. If you go back to the 80s and the 90s, local authority visual impairment services were growing, they were quite strong, they were relatively well resourced. And in recent years, that has started to come under pressure. And we know why, because of cuts to local authority budgets. The balance of authority and responsibility, I suppose, lies much more now with individual schools. And that makes perfect sense for most children, because, you know, the more local you are to the child, the better. But with something very specialist like visual impairment, it's quite hard for schools to know what they don't know, and it's quite hard for them to find the resources that they need to do a job properly. And that's why I think regular access to QTVIs, well-trained teaching assistants, these are all really important factors in making sure that inclusion works well. And from the sound of it, in Kelsey's situation, it does work well. Yep. But I'm not sure that that's replicated across the country.
Frank McFarlane?
I think also what's important is that the teachers have to be geared up. They have to be astute to realise that they can't just turn up for a lesson with a wad of papers that they can just dish out round the desks and here, read this, kids. You can't do it. You've got to be prepared. Stuff's got to be put into Braille, or Kelsey with his diagrams, etc. And that's important. And teachers are much better at it now than I think they were. I think they got a shock originally, because some teachers did say, you know, well, I didn't qualify to teach the blind or the deaf. I don't want to. And it's not something that everybody would want to do.
I think
Annie,
you're
yeah.
right. I think you're right, Frank. Joint planning is the key to successful access all round. But it's hard. It's challenging sometimes. We can spend many hours chasing teachers down corridors. Just a minute. But
and Annie, how is that being affected by the funding issue that Rory raised?
I think times are tough. The other element I was just going to add to Frank's point was that mainstream teachers are under far more pressure now in their daily job. The level of administration, planning, assessment that they are responsible for has grown. So you have to strike up a very supportive relationship as a peripatetic teacher with mainstream teachers. You have to acknowledge the pressures that they're under and work with that.
And would they be likely to have had any training on how to teach visually impaired children?
Yes. I think one of the strengths of the peri services across the country is delivering timely training sessions around the needs of individual pupils, whether it be whole school, a selected group of teachers or an individual class teacher and a teaching assistant. So I think we're really good at that.
I would agree with Annie on that. As long as you're in a local authority which has good relationships with those schools, because part of the issue, it seems to me, with the growth of academies is that schools are largely autonomous nowadays, and some schools, particularly there's a move now to maybe traded services, local authorities selling their services to schools, and that depends on the willingness of that school to buy in that service in the first place.
I think also I'm chairman of a school board of governors in Liverpool, and it's a mainstream school, Church of England school, mixed, sixth form, etc. And if we have some children with disabilities, strong disabilities, you may get some money. But if a Frank McFarlane, totally blind, just is allowed into the school, then you don't necessarily get very much money, if any, and it's assumed that the SENCO, the Special Education Needs Coordinator, will know all that they need to know and will sort it all out.
Annie Bearfield.
I think there is pressure on school budgets, and the peripatetic support services are funded, the school budgets are top sliced, and special needs children are funded through the high needs block funding. Now, there is pressure on that in every local authority around the country. The children who are at risk from not receiving the specialist VI teacher support are the mild to moderate children.
Do you mean mild to moderate in terms of sight?
In terms of their sight, yeah. Significant numbers of these children, however, will have additional needs. They may have a learning difficulty, they may have a behaviour issue, and looking at those children holistically, the specialist input from the QTVI is critical to their access to the curriculum and to their outcomes, their lifelong outcomes. So many services, or some services I know, are working to capacity rather than to need. So they're having to cut their cloth according to the amount that they're funded. There are 2 local authorities within the West Midlands who have been cut back to the bone in terms of their teachers and specialist teaching assistants. Those services will not be looking at children with mild to moderate visual difficulties or visual impairments. Those children are at risk.
I think, Peter, this raises the whole issue of the postcode lottery, as it's commonly known, which and under successive governments there's been a resistance to the idea that you need to set any sort of national standard for how children with particular special needs are supported and the levels of support they should have. So if there's 150 plus local authorities in the country, there are 150 plus variations or potential variations in how children with visual impairment, how much support they get.
So what would you like to see there, Rory? Can you give us examples of the kind of area where you want the curriculum to be, as it were, special?
Well,
and different.
I think that's a slightly different question about the curriculum. I was talking just now about support levels and particularly access to specialist support. So there, in that area, Annie's already mentioned obviously the crucial role of the QTVI. And another, I think, positive development over the last few years has been the development of what we call habilitation services. So habilitation officers who are, they're not teachers, but they specialise in teaching mobility and living skills to children, which complements the role of the QTVI enormously. And that's been a really strong development in the last 10 or so years, that role exists and has been professionalised.
So we're just to make this clear to people who don't know all the terminology, this is about people learning not just academically, but to get around, to cook, to do all those kind of things.
Yeah, day-to-day living.
Because I think as Annie, I think, said initially, when integration and inclusion started, there was a big focus on access to the curriculum. That's what schools were for. That's what we should be providing. And often that was at the expense of children learning these additional skills that sighted children pick up incidentally, and if you're visually impaired, you don't. But also some of the support strategies that were used and sometimes still are used with these children, such as a support assistant, a teaching assistant in the class with you. Sometimes those things get in the way of children's wider inclusion. So there's a balance to be struck all the time, and I think it's really important that we can that balance shifts for children over time. Somebody needs to be keeping an eye on that and measuring it and adjusting it accordingly, and that's why you need the specialists to stay involved all the way through.
And that balance is very, very difficult. Rory's right, very difficult to achieve, because it's no longer acceptable to say blind child or severely visually impaired child, well, in PE, you can't do PE because there's 25 and you're on your own, you're going to get in the way, whatever, so you can go and learn your Braille. Now, that used to be the case. It's much better than it now, but that is not acceptable. Or if you need mobility to learn how to use a cane, whatever, or a guide dog, well, you can go and do that when we have French or food technology. That mustn't be. So the curriculum has got to be fair, balanced.
Kelsey, who we heard earlier, he said that it took him about 18 months to kind of get that sort of freedom and to learn the school. That's what he said. Can I just get you all to change tack for a moment, because I'm thinking of parents, of course, because this is all quite a confusing landscape that they're hearing about. And although much is made of parental choice, parents don't always feel that they get that choice. I want you to listen. This is Kafil Jahangir, who was worrying because he felt there was no appropriate provision in his borough for his visually impaired daughter, whilst the borough wasn't willing to send her out of the area.
Well, we're in June. My daughter doesn't have a school as yet that she can go to. We were given a school in May, and I had already voiced concerns about that school not being appropriate for her. I don't even think the school even believes that they're probably not even appropriate for my daughter. So we're kind of left in a situation whereby come September, my daughter might not have a school to go to, and that's very worrying.
So you mean there were no schools with that, as it were, a unit, a visual impairment unit?
Yeah, because, my daughter can't just go to any school. Westminster have said that, they'll send her to a girls' school in Marylebone and they will set up a unit over there. I understand that, but, going to that school and seeing that school and, talking to the school, they know, and we know, that they can't cope with my daughter. Not only that, a child has social needs as well. It's also being able to interact with children who have similar disabilities as herself. And she doesn't have that. And there are no schools like that in Westminster or any of these areas.
That was Kafil Jahangir talking a year ago. That issue was resolved in the end. But Frank, I imagine that's a problem that the special schools, for example, come across quite a lot now, the ones that are left, because they often, because boroughs and councils think they don't have the money and think they can do the job.
So often, parents are in the dark. They don't know what their options are. And unless somebody in the local authority gives them those options, well, then they'll go where they're told to go, unless they are determined to go to tribunal and bang their head on county hall door. But so often they say, oh, that's all there is, so we'll have to take that. And I think it's absolutely criminal that local authorities are supposed to give them all the options, but they don't.
Annie?
I think that school choice is generally limited by local authority budgets. That's the first thing to say. But if you look beyond that, services can be creative as long as they're committed to looking at how they give children access to a visual impairment community. Growing up with a visual impairment means that you are different to your fully sighted peers. And I have believed throughout my career that it's really, really important to give visually impaired children the opportunity to be with other children like them. So in our authority, for example, we have a youth club, a weekly youth club. We have residentials and we have day trips and family days. So we build a visual impairment community, a local community, so that our young people can feel comfortable. You know, they can learn to accept the limitations of their visual impairment but not be defined by it. And it's important, particularly if you're losing your vision, it's very important to have that opportunity to be with other children who have lost their vision or have no vision. So it is important in terms of when you're looking at school placement. It's not just about inclusion in a practical sense. It's about the social and emotional needs of children and young people, and being part of a visual impairment community is important for some of those children.
Another thing that I think we need to bear in mind is that visual impairment in children is very low incidence as a disability, and therefore the range of placements that's available it has declined almost inevitably because of the growth of inclusion. Also, the population has changed up to a point, so there are more children with additional needs. So most of the special schools that do now exist for visual impairment, strangely, they're not well distributed geographically. So in the West Midlands, where Annie and I are, there's 5 of the 10 in the whole country. But they tend to now to cater more for children with additional needs. So the sort of issue Annie was talking about children wanting a peer group, wanting to feel part of a community, a child who was just visually impaired might not feel part of a community in many of the special schools that still exist. So there's a big logistical problem here, and I think in the past people have talked about regional provision, trying to work out ways of making effective regional provision under the new Children and Families Act, which the government brought in 2014. There's a commitment to try and encourage local authorities to develop regional commissioning frameworks, but in visual impairment provision that doesn't seem to happen yet. So
what would that actually mean practically? You're talking about regional provision. What should they be doing?
Well, I think it could be around, you mentioned units. I think we don't tend to talk of units so much now. We talk about resourced provision, so a mainstream school that might draw children in from a range of authorities around, but it would have staff, specialist QTVIs and teaching assistants, and the teaching staff at that school would be familiar with teaching visually impaired children. The disadvantage, of course, is that for a number of the children, visually impaired children that might go there, it wouldn't be their local school.
One problem that doesn't seem to have been solved, if you look at the stats, is how far education, wherever you get it, is fitting youngsters for jobs. We still quote the 3 in 4 people of working age who aren't actually in employment. Annie, are we even scratching the surface of this problem?
Sadly, Peter, I don't think we are. I think the statistics tell a very sorry tale, and locally we know of several young adults who are sort of virtually sitting at home with access to social media and a computer, but no access to a meaningful life, in terms of employment or in supported employment. I mean, I could share some success stories, but I think those are outweighed by the unemployment statistics for young adults who are visually impaired.
Yeah, Frank.
Sorry, Peter. Annie, and when I'm going to exaggerate to make a point, when we do hear of a success story, there is almost rejoicing throughout the land that there's a blind person got a job, and that is so sad. It shouldn't be a huge surprise that they've got a job.
What responsibility for that lies on education, wherever it's given?
There's been a big research project going on for the last 6 or 7 years at Birmingham University, looking at a large group of young people as they've moved on from school into further or higher education, and then now they're coming out the other end at an age where they would normally be going into work. And I think what that is showing is that we know that visually impaired children academically do well compared to most other disability groups. What they seem to lack is the softer skills, the skills that are, if they get an interview, It's the difference between getting the interview on the basis of a paper application and getting the job. They maybe lack work experience. I mean, nowadays we know how hard it is to get a job if you can't point to any previous experience.
But bluntly, that is the school's responsibility, isn't it? They should be getting practice much earlier.
Yes.
Well, they should, and I think this again takes you back to the curriculum. The emphasis is very much on the academic curriculum. Schools are increasingly judged by academic performance. We know the exam system has been tightened up now so that everything is based on how you do in your end of course exams, and all of that puts pressure on the additional curriculum that these children and young people need, and that's where it seems that there's a deficit. As they come out of the education system, they may have the results, they don't have those wider skills that their peers, sighted peers, may have.
I think there's still a fair bit of educating to do of the, can I say, the sighted world, and people know what I mean. In my final years at St Vincent's, part of my job was a work experience coordinator, etc. And I would ring up and say that I got a student and we'd like to try work experience, be it a bank or whatever. And that was okay. Then you'd mention that they were a blind person. There'd be a pause down the line, almost a sharp intake of breath, and good Lord, they had their thoughts were that blind person was going to trip over everything and whatever. Once I went down there as a blind person and showed them that I could get down there, etc., things eased.
I said we wouldn't be debating special versus mainstream, which we aren't going to do, but I wonder, is there another definition of special that we ought to be considering, i.e. some way of providing more funding, whether in or outside the mainstream framework? More money, in other words, whether it's from charities or trusts. You know, can you really achieve equality without introducing an element of inequality? In other words, more funding. Rory, is that such a daft idea?
No, I think the idea of weighting the funding that goes into this area according to the needs of the children is very necessary. I suppose the government would say that that's what the SEN Code of Practice and the framework and education, health and care plans should be doing already, that everything should be based on an assessment of individual need and the funding follows accordingly. But we know that different local authorities struggle with that. I think there is a case for top slicing the education budget and saying there are particular groups of children who need something that is special and on top of what other children get. And that takes me back to the issue of visual impairment in children being low incidence and high need. We have England and Wales, I think we're talking about 25,000 children up to the age of 16. That's a tiny proportion of the whole, and yet those children have such an enormous range of needs potentially, and you can't have a one-size-fits-all policy that is going to address those needs.
Annie, with your inclusion hat on, I mean, the thing is people blench when you say that because it almost sounds as if you're suggesting charity, which of course is the dirty word. But actually that's what I am suggesting, and I mean 40 years ago I wouldn't have believed I could hear myself saying such a thing. But if we haven't solved the problem, for example about children getting into making that transition from to mainstream and getting jobs, then we aren't looking at it radically enough, are we? I mean, does it have to be state money? I mean, Rory's talked about that, but he's put it in terms of, you know, top slicing, but more money out of the central budget. But should we look at money elsewhere? Because that money isn't going to come.
Whoa, looking for money elsewhere is
it's a very American idea, isn't it? Yeah.
Will be a major challenge for us. I mean, I think we're sort of treading water in many local authorities. We know there are increasing pressures on local authority and school budgets. Just looking for money for developing, you know, for social development has been a major challenge for myself. You know, 3 years ago I had £63,000 from a pot. That pot no longer exists for us. So it's a challenge. Have you got any ideas, Peter?
But you're still, well, Frank, what's your reaction to what I'm suggesting?
I think your idea is not a bad one. That sounds condescending. No, I think it's okay. Realistically, it might be difficult to do. This, quite rightly, in my book, has not been a discussion one versus the other, because in my book, always it's each child on their merits. But I think you'd have to say that the money should be available to special schools, to mainstream schools. But I think basically your idea is worth pursuing.
Yeah, go on, Roy.
Can I say, Pete, I think it's a very complex set of issues. I think what we need is a national debate that brings all of these issues together, because the trouble with the way that we're trying to address them at the moment is it's piecemeal, and you can't deal with it because it's the interrelationship between them that makes the difference.
The trouble is, when people say there should be a national debate, what they normally mean is let's have a working party, let's kick the ball into the long grass, and in 20 years' time we'll be in exactly the same position.
Well, if you can find several £1 million to subsidise your idea of doing it another way, then that would be great. But I suspect it's a case of going to government with as much evidence as we can find to say these children, young people deserve better. And we know that, but we have to make our case against a lot of other deserving causes in order to drive it home.
Annie, last word.
Well, I'd say one of our priorities, if we could secure some additional funding, would be to do a project following on from Graham Douglas's longitudinal research.
That's at Birmingham University.
Yeah, at Birmingham University. The transition from school to further and higher education and to hopefully the workplace. I think that's where we as professionals need to put some additional funding in to look at how we get young people to be able to self-advocate, to go out there and get those jobs. That's where I think we need to put some additional funding.
And I'm afraid that's it for today. I know we've only scratched the surface. We'd love your views, your arguments, your experiences. You can call our action line on 0800 044 044 and email intouch@bbc.co.uk. Many thanks to Rory Cobb, to Annie Bearfield and to Frank McFarlane. From me, Peter White, producer Lee Kumitat and the team. Goodbye.
This is the BBC.
This is In Touch, the magazine programme for people like me who are blind or partially sighted. I'm Peter White. Thanks for downloading this week's edition. Good evening. Moving house is tough at the best of times. Finding the right place, finding the right price. But if you're visually impaired, you can add to that coping with the print paperwork, the inevitable chaos of moving out and moving in again, and, some of our listeners have been telling us, a nasty whiff of discrimination as well. Well, in a moment we'll be hearing about some of those problems and about your legal rights to counter them. But we're also celebrating the more comforting side of home, the now popular again art of baking, thanks to the success of a certain BBC television series. Well, our studio guest today is Penny Melville Brown. Now, Penny has won a $25,000 Holman Prize. It's given by the San Francisco Lighthouse for the Blind, and it'll take her around the world. But she's brought those skills to the In Touch studio first. Penny, this is a short programme and we've set you a challenge. Tell us what you're going to make.
Well, I thought I'd do a tiramisu, but just a cheats one because it's a really easy version.
Right, so how much have you had to cheat?
Well, I've taken out the eggs and the sabayon type of aspect. So this is cream, mascarpone, sponge fingers and booze. And that's a jolly good combination.
What was the toughest thing about carrying on baking and making things when you lost your sight, which was back in the 90s?
I was lucky because I lost my sight over a period. I think one adapts, and finding temperatures actually, whether things are done. So I now use a speaking thermometer, which I got from America, and that is invaluable. And I've got my talking scales, and I have my little voice pen that sort of tells you what things are. So finding things, that can be really boring, trotting around a kitchen for hours trying to find the turmeric or something like that.
And you're actually trying to do this on a pretty small table, aren't you? Is that an advantage? At least you can't lose stuff, can you?
It's an advantage for me because I don't have to clear up.
Someone else will do that. The producer, no doubt. And we'll talk more about the background to the Holman Prize and what you're going to do with it later on.
Thanks.
And while Penny knocks up her tiramisu, I'm sure I shouldn't have said that, let's get to the business of finding a home to make it in. I'm also joined by Danielle Burgess from the Isle of Wight and Ben Rendell from Worcester. Now, both of whom have recently been grappling with the housing market and not having a great time of it either. Danielle, you're renting at the moment, but you're looking around for something else to rent. How's it going?
It's going okay. Actually, this morning, the property we were after has actually been confirmed that we will be able to have it. But up until that point, it's been quite stressful.
Right, so we do a programme about problems and you solve your problem on the morning of the programme.
Yes,
well,
exactly.
That's good for you. I mean, what sort of difficulties, though, have you been encountering?
Well, initially, trying to find somewhere, because I'm renting, so it was looking online. Now, because of my sight impairment, I can't do that very easily, so I've had to rely greatly on my partner and carer to look at details, to describe rooms, to describe where the houses are going to be, or the accommodation, where it is going to be located.
And what about the business of actually going round them? How easy is it for you to assess how suitable they are for you?
It is a problem. I'm having to rely on someone else to give me a very good description of what I'm going to come across in terms of room sizes, stairs, etc.
Now, part of the frustration must be that you know you can do this, don't you? You've done it before when you could see better.
Exactly, yes. So, 6 years ago when I moved from the mainland to the Isle of Wight, yes, I was able to do it with a little bit of help. But now I'm totally reliant on my partner and carer to help me.
What would help you more? And I mean, clearly, if there is someone to help, that makes a difference. But in terms of how you get the information and what the people who are actually selling or renting could do, are there things that would make it easier?
Well, I suppose if there was a bit more time. I realise that rental properties come and go very quickly, but if we had a bit more time to have a look at the property, maybe even have a second viewing, just so that get in your head where exactly things are.
Let me bring in Ben Rendell, who's joining us from Worcester. Now, you've just bought a flat recently, I think. Both you and your partner are visually impaired. So when it came to choosing the flat you wanted, what kind of problems did you face?
Well, it was mainly similar problems like accessing, photos, because that seems to be the main focus of a lot of when you're looking online and stuff. It's pictures of this and that, and then it's being able to get to the places to view them, because obviously if you don't know where a place is or you're unfamiliar with it, being able to access that location to then go and view it, and then obviously getting the help from the person who's taking you around to, because some of them are just a bit cautious about helping you because of health and safety and that sort of thing.
Is it health and safety, or is it that they don't know quite how to do it, or is it that that's not my job?
I think they're scared of doing something wrong and getting into trouble for it, basically. I don't think there's any rule that says they can't do it. They just don't know what to do, and they're scared, really. It's not as simple as that.
Were there more things that you could have maybe either done for yourself or asked them to do? I'm thinking, for example, of, tactile models, maybe, enlarging floor plans, that sort of thing.
Yeah, tactile model would have certainly helped, because we bought, in the end, we ended up buying off plan, so it hadn't even been built yet, so there wasn't actually a physical location we could actually go and touch and feel and that sort of thing. So a tactile model would have helped, because they had lots of plans and lots of drawings, but they didn't help me. I mean, I was fortunate to have a good friend who is very good at describing things, but had I not had that, it would have made my decision very difficult.
But you have made a decision and you have bought?
Yeah, we have. I mean, fortunately, in the end, they were able to show us around a home that was similar, not the same, but similar. So it did give us an idea of what we were getting.
Right. What's the biggest problem you've found? Danielle first.
Well, when we've looked at sites online, or should I say my partner has looked at sites online, and we've thought, oh yes, that's a possibility. When we've gone to phone the agent, they've turned around and said, oh no, that's already gone, or it's under application. And we have actually gone to the trouble of registering with all these agents. So we sort of think that we are on a register. So as soon as a property comes available, we would be getting a phone call. But that doesn't happen. We end up having to phone them. And by the time the property has come online, we found that it's gone.
Right. So that in a way also, very directly related to your visual impairment, because you'd see it otherwise.
Yes,
Ben, what about you?
Yeah, so its biggest problem is estate agents, because they don't necessarily understand your needs, and it's them communicating those needs to the landlord. And by the time that they've done that, often, someone else has come along for the property, and it just seems easier for the estate agent to say yes to that other person, and then by the time that's happened, other properties that you liked have gone, and it's a pace thing really as well. I think you have to be very quick in the rental market.
Yes, you do. They go very, very quickly, and especially in a small area as well, small town.
Well, just before we get some answers to those points, Penny Melville Brown is sitting at her makeshift studio work surface here. We're not going to lie and deceive people and pretend you're doing all that from scratch, but you've what would you have had to done to get this to the state that it is now?
Well, I've beaten up as I said, the mascarpone and the cream and the amaretto. So now I'm just dipping these really very sharp, crisp biscuits into a mixture of very strong coffee and amaretto. I'm going to lay them down on a tray, whap some cream onto the top of it, do another few layers like that, and finished off with a cream layer. So it's very quick, very simple. Ideally, it should go into a fridge for an hour or so just to firm up, but I don't think we're going to manage that.
What, in the time?
Oh, I think with the ravenous appetite.
I see the people surrounding us all with their arms outstretched. Right, back to the problem in hand about housing. Craig Underwood is managing partner of a law firm which specialises in property services, and I suggested to him that while we knew that the Equality Act related to goods and services offers some protection against direct discrimination, wasn't the real problem with property unprovable indirect discrimination?
I think it's very difficult. You'd probably be very hard pressed to find a situation where somebody with visual impairment has been discriminated against in a very overt or clear way. I think what's far more likely to happen is that somebody with a disability is the subject of indirect discrimination, or the type of discrimination which is a lot more covert. And so in practical terms, for instance, it may well be that when you speak to a private landlord, and very often you have to remember that private landlords use letting agents and estate agents to deal with their properties on their behalf, that in applying to become a tenant, you don't necessarily become that tenant because you're vetted out. And it may well be that you're not vetted out because you have a disability, but it may be for some other reason. And I think that's probably the problem that people with disabilities face.
Because that's what we hear a lot. You see, we hear people say, look, I think I've been discriminated against, but I can't prove it, but I am suspicious.
I think probably the system doesn't help in that sense, because I don't want to paint private landlords as being, the evil ones in the picture. At the end of the day, the private landlord system is predominantly, well, over 55% of the private landlord market is made up of people who own just one house. And I think it's probably the case that those landlords have a lack of awareness about some of the rights that those with disabilities have. It's probably the case that some landlords also just don't have the underlying support and infrastructure to be able to provide what they perceive to be onerous obligations to people with disabilities. And I think there is a misconception within the private rental space as to just what facilities, aids and appliances and reasonable adjustments landlords might have to make.
Daniel Burgess,
yes.
Does that ring bells with you, this idea that it is indirect discrimination that people are finding?
Yes, I believe so. I do believe that. I mean, they make an assumption. I had an experience with one of our agents who had seen a property and then had made the assumption he didn't think it would be suitable. And I said, and my partner and I said, well, we'll be the judge of that.
What did he base that on? Do you know?
Well, I think it was because there were steps and it was coming onto a main road. And I thought, well, I know that there are steps and I know that there's a gate at the end of the road, so I know to take precautions.
Ben Rendell, I think you feel you found yourself in this position, perhaps in a way that will ring a lot of bells, and that's over guide dogs.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, before I decided to buy, I was in the rental market a couple of times looking for properties. Both times I had my guide dog with me and came across a lot of problems. Even I didn't get as far as looking at properties. It was just ringing letting agents saying, this is what I need, this is what I want. And by the way, I've got a guide dog. And, sometimes they'd be like, oh, we'll ring you back, and then you'd never get a phone call, or they'd say there's no pets, and then you'd go through explain that it's not a pet, and then they'd say, well, we have to ask the landlord, and yeah.
Yes, and I agree with Ben on that point as well. Exactly the same thing. You know, people don't get back to you. You're expected to do all the work yourself.
But again, it's proving that that's happened, that it's the problem.
It is, because they'll never admit to it, and they'll just say, oh, the landlord said this, or we've let it to someone else, or it's gone off the market, or any number of excuses. But they might not be because of the dog, but you can never prove it. And even if you could prove it, how would you then enforce that portion of the law, as it were?
Well, on this in particular, Craig Underwood has some very interesting and intriguing things to say regarding the law on this.
The first position is, in law, it is unlawful for you to refuse a tenancy on the basis that you don't want to have the tenant have a guide dog or a hearing dog or anything of that nature. The question is whether or not you'll ever find out whether or not that's the reason that you've been refused a tenancy. And I think the redress that you have is very much dependent on how you can prove that was the reason for you not being able to get that tenancy.
And I mean, are there any ways that you can do that?
Well, there is a situation in terms of how you disclose whether or not you have a disability, which might give rise to some indirect or covert discrimination. It's very difficult to give advice about disclosure. Firstly, the law says that you are not under positive duty to disclose any disability. So, following that to its logical conclusion, you don't need, as somebody who's got visual impairment, to tell anybody that you have a guide dog. However, in practical terms, it has to be said that there are circumstances in which making a disclosure that you have a disability is actually in your favour, and that's particularly the case if you're in social housing or local authority housing. But if you're in a privately rented situation, I think it's very difficult to envisage a situation whereby that disclosure, even if it's not made, is not going to be something that the landlord finds out about. As with an employer-employee relationship, a landlord and tenant relationship is one which, ultimately is probably best founded on trust, openness and transparency. So I wouldn't advise necessarily you embarking upon what should be an enduring relationship with not making full disclosure. But be under no illusion that you're under a positive duty to do so. You're not.
So after the contract has been signed, what happens if either they've not disclosed that they got a guide dog or they acquire a guide dog?
If it's a situation where your visual impairment had deteriorated and you therefore needed to have a guide dog after the event, then again, the law says that you must make reasonable adjustments, and therefore, upon disclosing that you now required additional aids and services, in this case a guide dog or a hearing dog or whatever that might be, then your landlord will be on a duty to make sure that any such policy which required them to refuse household pets would be amended to take into account the fact that you now needed a guide dog.
Well, Ben and Danielle, can I ask you both very quickly, does that come as a surprise to you that you're under no obligation to tell them, and would you take that advice? Danielle first, maybe?
I probably would take that advice, actually. It is a bit of a surprise, but I think I will go along with that, definitely.
And Ben?
To me, it's not a surprise, but to be honest, I wouldn't feel comfortable not telling someone about it, because I think it is best to be open and honest, but that seems to get us into more trouble than it's worth. So.
Well, Ben Rendell, Danielle Burgess, thank you both very much for joining us, and good luck. Well, Ben's in, and Danielle, I hope things go well for you.
Thank you very much.
And I'm only sorry you're both too far away to get a piece of Penny's tiramisu, because you're sort of more or less putting the finishing touches to this now. So where have you got to?
Well, I've got a little sieve here and a box of cocoa powder which smells really chocolatey, and this is the good bit for blind people, is trying to put cocoa powder through a sieve onto something that you can't see. So you're guiding yourself along this tiramisu thing and just pushing it through, and adding a bit more. And I'm glad I'm not cleaning this studio up tomorrow.
No, I don't get that on my braille. Just while you're doing this, tell us a bit more about the prize that you've won, which is going to take you around the world. It's the Holman Prize. What is it?
Well, it's run by an organisation in San Francisco, and they saw my Baking Blind videos online, and they invited me to compete. In fact, at the end of the day, it was over 200 people were candidates from 27 countries. And I was one of the 3 winners. I am one of the 3 winners.
So what swung it, do you think, Penny? What did you have to do?
It was about promoting different perceptions of blind people and other disabled people. It was about getting good visibility for those new messages. But one of the other winners is going to kayak across the Bosphorus with some specially adapted navigation equipment.
Which would you rather do, bake or kayak across the Bosphorus?
Well, I'd rather swim, but I gather it's a really busy shipping lane.
Right. But this is very much about promoting the image of what blind people can do, isn't it?
Yeah. For me, that's really important.
And in a way ties in with what we were talking about the kind of misconceptions that seem to crop up with people in the housing market, for example.
Yeah, I'm trying to use food because everybody eats. Most people cook. It's really popular in the media. And if one can show that actually I can do it and other blind people are cooking with me too, and you get a good reaction. And
you'll be making videos, I think, as you travel around.
Everywhere we go, every recipe we shoot, we'll be publishing over about a year. We're reckoning to make about 50 videos over the year.
Well, I'm afraid the pinger timer of life is against you. Well, let me just remind anyone with a comment, you can call our action line on 0800 044 044. You can email intouch@bbc.co.uk, or you can go to our website to download tonight's podcast. You can't download Penny's pudding, but producer Lee Kumatat and I can. And I've got the plate. I'll just put my fingers in it, but never mind. It tastes delicious, Penny. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
This is Chris.
And this is Pauline.
Reading out the questions for the client consultation survey. This is advanced information in order to give you more time to consider your responses. Client consultation. Established in 1895, the Isle of Wight Society for the Blind, IWSB, is one of the oldest independent charities on the Isle of Wight. We are inviting clients and prospective clients to have their say and identify their priorities in a consultation exercise that will help determine Isle of Wight Society for the Blind future plans and activities. Our continuing purpose is to provide practical, emotional and educational support for visually impaired people, their families and carers, and promote awareness of the needs of those affected by sight loss amongst the general public.
We strive to help people maintain independence, learn new skills and participate in social, physical and educational activities to reduce loneliness and isolation. Currently, we organise weekly coffee mornings, educational talks and seminars, craft clubs, weekly swimming sessions, walking and golf, a visiting and befriending service, a weekly audio version of the Isle of Wight County Press, and a library of audio books. To help ensure the services we provide in the future meet the needs of our existing and potential clients, the Society will use the survey to guide and develop our strategic plans. With your help, we can ensure that our resources are targeted wisely to meet your needs. Thank you very much for participating in this survey. Your feedback is invaluable in guiding our future.
Do you currently use any of the services supported by the Isle of Wight Society for the Blind? Your answer is either yes or no.
If you answered no, please go to question 3. If you answered yes, please rate how positive each have on your well-being under the following. And the headings are not applicable, not at all, slightly positive, moderately positive, very positive, extremely positive. This is Strollers Walking Group, Dolphin Swimming Group, Millbrook House Weekly Coffee Morning.
Bembridge Monthly Coffee Morning.
Knighton Monthly Coffee Morning.
Freshwater Monthly Coffee Morning.
Owls, Millbrook House, meeting with guest speaker.
Knitters and Natterers, social group at Millbrook House.
Striders Walking Group.
Talking News.
Audio Library.
Newsletter.
Millbrook House Resource Room of Aids and Equipment for the Visually Impaired.
Millbrook House Braille document production.
Millbrook House as a point of contact for information for the visually impaired.
Isle of Wight Society for the Blind volunteer home visit service.
Opportunities to volunteer for IWSB.
The golf group.
And the 10-pin bowling group. Please rate how positive an impact the following services might have on your well-being if IWSB were able to coordinate them for clients. As with our existing provision, the Society covers any general administrative, organisational costs and room use at Millbrook House. Categories are, and we'd like you to say not at all, or slightly positive, moderately positive, very positive, extremely positive. Age-appropriate exercise classes such as yoga.
Other sport or activity taster days.
Support to participate in a sponsored challenge event, e.g. the Isle of Wight Cycle Challenge, walk, run, marathon, skydive, etc., to raise awareness and funds for the Society.
Craft taster sessions.
Monthly food and drink tasting group with sessions at Millbrook House.
Monthly food and drink tasting group with sessions at other venues.
Quarterly day trips to Isle of Wight heritage sites or tourist attractions.
Quarterly day trips to the mainland heritage sites or tourist attractions.
Holidays and short breaks organised by the Society, supported with the provision of sighted volunteers to assist with guiding, not care provision.
Monthly music group to include singing, listening, an occasional concert or live performance visits.
Quarterly storytelling or poetry recital group, your chance to spin a good yarn or share favourite poems.
Social activities closer to your home.
Introduction to technology course of perhaps 6 weekly sessions looking at computers, iPads, mobile phones and apps for the visually impaired.
Monthly technology group to keep abreast of development in computers, iPads, mobile phones and apps for the visually impaired.
Quarterly technology group to keep abreast of development in computers, iPads, mobile phones and apps for the visually impaired.
Evening/weekend social group for 65+ year olds.
Evening, weekend social group for 50 to 64 year olds.
Evening, weekend social group for 36 to 49 year olds.
Evening, weekend social group for 19 to 35 year olds.
Evening social activities for young people aged 16 to 18 years.
Evening social club for 11 to 15 year olds.
Evening social club for 7 to 10 year olds.
Quarterly evening social meeting at Millbrook House for parents, guardians, carers of young people with visual impairment, with separate activities arranged for any accompanying young people.
School summer holiday activities or social event for visually impaired young people and their parents, guardians or carers.
Dancing.
Please add any further suggestions of services or activities you would like the Society to provide.
Other suggestions. Please suggest any sport or activities you would like to try. Please identify the challenge event or activity you would be interested in. Please suggest any craft activities you would like to try. Please indicate here the styles of music you would enjoy.
In relation to social and recreational activities, please indicate whether you would generally prefer activities targeted and arranged specifically for those with visual impairment, or activities that are open to both sighted and visually impaired people where reasonable adjustments are made to accommodate the particular needs of the visually impaired.
Visual impairment aside, on a scale of 0 to 10, where 10 is very healthy, how healthy do you feel at the moment?
Being connected is more than having a network of friends and family. It could include being connected to your community, having the ability to access services
or help when you need it, and being digitally connected. On a scale of 0 to 10, where 10 is very connected, how connected to others do you feel?
On a scale of 0 to 10, where 10 is very confident, how confident are you using technology, the internet in everyday life? For example, using email, the internet, social media, online banking, shopping, etc.
How do you find out about the following? The headings are printed leaflets or posters, word of mouth, Isle of Wight Society for the Blind website, other internet, social media, radio, talking news, or other, and then please specify. Local events, social activities. Contact details for organisations and services for the visually impaired. Health information relating to sight loss. Other health services and information. And travel.
About Isle of Wight Society for the Blind, what, if anything, do you know about Isle of Wight Society for the Blind? How would you describe Isle of Wight Society for the Blind to others?
Would you favour a name change of the society to promote a more inclusive organisation that supported those with visual impairment? For example, Isle of Wight Vision. Your answer is yes or no.
Would you like to suggest a new working name for the society that would reflect a more inclusive and forward-looking ethos? Please remember that this survey and all responses are completely anonymous. Information gathered is purely to enable us to better understand the needs of visually impaired islanders to inform our future plans and services.
Please indicate which age range you are in. Under 10 years, 11 to 15 years, 16 to 18 years, 19 to 35 years, 36 to 49 years, 50 to 64 years, 65 to 74 years, 75 to 84 years, 85 plus years, or you've the option prefer not to say.
What is your gender?
What is your current status? Please tick all that apply. Are you a full-time student of any age? A part-time student of any age? Employed? Homemaker? Unemployed? Semi-retired? Or retired?
Do you volunteer for any organisation? Yes? No? Prefer not to say? If yes, which organisation?
Please tell us the first part, that is the 4 digits of your postcode.
Please let us have any comments, questions or concerns.
Please identify if you have completed this and independently. Firstly, as a visually impaired client or prospective client, or as a volunteer, carer, guardian or visually impaired parent.
Thank you for completing this survey.